Hey World History, this is Miss Corey. Welcome to U0-L7, How We Measure Historical Events. All right, learning targets. Understand how time is measured, distinguish between AD and BC, and CE and BCE, understand basic concepts of a timeline, and how to do the three main questions to analyze historical documents. Your job, questions that I ask you today that I want you to answer on the Edpuzzle will be in this blue text. So questions will pop up on the side of your Edpuzzle video. Answer them to the best you can. I'm not going to be grading you and if you get the answers right or wrong today, just if you get an educated guess. I will deduct points for Edpuzzle grades if your response is really off topic. For example, if I ask you, what do you think is the beginning of history? And you answer like something ridiculous like, I don't know, skateboard. I'm going to deduct points from you because obviously you didn't read the question or try to think about your answer. And yes, I do individually grade all the answers, and I really do enjoy seeing what you have to say. Another thing is if you don't get the Edpuzzles to pop up on the side of the screen, make sure that your ad blocker is off. You may also get a score after your Edpuzzle and you're like, wait, teacher, I got like a 0 or like a 1.7 or a 3 or like a 4.44, like some weird numbers sometimes on my Edpuzzle, but I watched it all the way through. What's up? Don't panic. This is just Edpuzzle kicking a grade into Schoology. It's just telling me I need to go into Edpuzzle and then grade your answers. Give me just a couple days to do that. And then if you did it right, you'll see that you'll get 5 points. So if you get like a weird score right off the bat, don't panic. I just have to go in and grade it. That's all that means. Also, make sure that when you watch the Edpuzzle, you watch it to the very, 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 very end. If you don't do that, you don't get the points. If I don't see that you got points, I mark you as absent, then you get attendance letters, and it's just not a fun time. So make sure that you watch the Edpuzzles all the way to the very end. Sometimes Edpuzzles have you submit it as well. So if a submit button ever comes up, click it. Okay, so do you have any questions about Edpuzzles? And if you don't, that's totally cool. Just type done. All right, let's get started on the slideshow. So, got a big question for you to start today. So what is time? So my question for you, take your best educated guess. Who defines time and how do you describe time? All right, and then what is history? So I'll give you the answer now. History is the chronological record of significant events as affecting a nation or an institute, usually of their causes. So pretty much what is happening in a society. And what is time? That is the measured or measurable period during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues. How we measure time? So we measure it in seconds, minutes, hours, but also days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries, millenniums. Calendars. Here's another question. Is our calendar that we use on a daily basis, the one that's January, February, March, the only calendar? No, there are a lot of different calendars out there, the Mayan calendar being one of the more famous ones. So today is actually the year 5786. If you went by the Hebrew calendar Elul, it begins with what the Hebrews believe is creation, which is estimated to be about 3760 BCE. This year is also 1448. If you went by the Islamic calendar, this calendar began with the year that Muhammad fled from Mecca. We'll learn about that when we talk about it in Unit 7. So how we define time in this class. About 20 or so years ago, schools used to use this thing called AD and BC. Some of you might know what that means, some of you might not. So the calendar most commonly used in the Western world, the one that we use like for school and stuff, which is January, February, March, has origins from the birth of Christ. It's also called the Gregorian calendar. And they used to label it as AD and BC. AD meaning Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. So anything after what would be Jesus's birth to what is now present would be AD, and then BC means before Christ. So anything before what would be Jesus's birth would be BC. In 1582, Christopher Columbus introduced our present calendar, and it allowed for 365 days and a leap year every year that is divisible by 4. So today, historians don't use BC or AD. We use CE and BCE. So BCE is just the old BC. It just means before Common Era. The dates don't change. So if you see anything BC, you can just translate it to BCE. The numbers don't change. And then CE is the old AD. So CE stands for Common Era. Again, the dates don't change. So, for example, July 4th, 1776 CE, same thing as July 4th, 1776 AD. Or September 7th, 2026 CE is the same as September 7th, 2026 AD. Or July 13th, 100 BCE means the same thing as July 13th, 100 BC. Some websites are updated with the BCE and CE. Some still use BC and AD. So I'm just telling you this so when we do research projects and you see like BC and AD and BCE and CE, you're not like, oh my gosh, what do these mean? They're transferable. It's just kind of different lingo. So here's a huge question for you. When do you think history begins? You're probably thinking like, oh, history. There is no beginning to history. Everything's history. Well, actually, there is a beginning to history. The beginning of history starts with the invention of writing. Okay, everything before that is prehistory. I'll explain that in just a couple slides. So, writing was invented in about 3,400 to 3,100 BCE. There are 4 distinct places on this earth where writing emerged separately, meaning they did not influence each other. The first one to pop up is Mesopotamia, which is right over here in the Middle East. Then we have Egypt at 3,250 BCE, which is over here in Northern Africa. China, which is over here in the east, was about 1,200 BCE. And then southern Mexico and Guatemala were about 500 BCE. So prehistory, that is just the time before writing. So it's everything before 3,400 BCE. And there is still a lot of artifacts that historians and other people can study, even though writing isn't quite invented yet. One of them being right here in the state of Minnesota. Have you ever seen the Jeffers petroglyphs? They're about 7,000 years old, located in southern Minnesota. That's considered prehistory. Then we have artifacts. Those are human-made objects, such as tools or jewelry. Who studies these artifacts? Those people, they're called archaeologists. They study bones and artifacts of humans and pre-humans. And then we have anthropologists. Anthropologists study culture, which is a group's way of life. That group can either be dead or still alive. And then we have paleontologists. You probably have heard of this one before. They study fossils, so plant and animal remains preserved in rocks, like dinosaurs. All right, let's talk about some of the oldest humanoids. So these are animals that aren't quite human yet, but they're starting to get human-like features. One of the oldest, his name is Artie, which is a 4.4 million year old female. This is what archaeologists have found with her remains. This is an artist's rendition of what she might have looked like. She was found over here in Ethiopia, which is on the Horn of Africa. It was found 46 miles from another very famous skeleton named Lucy, who's just, only 3.2 million years old. Artie was a biped, meaning that she walked on 2 limbs, and a quadruped, which means that she climbed trees with 4 limbs. So she's not quite human yet. She's just getting some of the human features. So when did humans or pre-humans take their first steps? So Mary Leakey and a team discovered prehistoric footprints in Tanzania, which is also in Africa, in 1978, and they called the Laetoli footprints. They belong to hominids, which are creatures that walked upright. And they were 3.6 million years ago. So this is what they look like. You can see where these hominids walked through what would have been like mud. And then, of course, the sun baked the mud, made it into stone. And 3.6 million years later, we can still see them. It's pretty crazy. All right, so evolution. I'm sure you've talked about evolution in probably since elementary school, to be completely honest with you. So eventually these humanoids would evolve more and more into what would be the modern day human and take their first steps outside of Africa, which we will learn about all in Unit 1. Trust me, we will learn a lot about that. Like a lot. All right, so we're going to switch subjects just a little bit. We're going to talk about documents. So in this course, every unit, we will try to analyze at least one primary source document. So here's a question for you. Just take your best educated guess. What is the difference between a primary source and a secondary source? So a primary source is documented by someone who witnessed or experienced the event. A secondary source would be documented by someone who is interpreting the event, did not witness or live through the event themselves. So here's an example. During what would be the start of World War II, we have Pearl Harbor. So this guy right here, if he wrote a book about what he saw, that'd be considered a primary source because he was there to witness it all. I mean, he's right there in the middle of the action, seeing all this flame and carnage. A secondary source would be like this news reporter here, talking on the radio to the American public about what is happening with Pearl Harbor. Yes, he might have some reporters on the ground that are giving primary source aspects, but him speaking through the radio to the American public makes it a secondary source because that guy speaking through the radio is probably in a studio. He's not there live on the scene getting information. So that's why it'd be considered a secondary source. So a lot of students get tripped up with primary and secondary sources, thinking that primary sources only can be written. But they're more than that. They can be written, but they can also be on TV. They can be spoken, videotaped, artists represented, diaries, letters, memorials, journals, speeches, manuscripts, and interviews. Another example would be the primary source is the Declaration of Independence. It is written by the Founding Fathers themselves. They are there making the country. That's a primary source. A secondary source example would be this book right here. It's Martin Luther King Jr., a biography by Roger Bruns. So Martin Luther King Jr. didn't write him himself. It was some Roger guy who wrote it. So that would be considered a secondary source. Another primary source example would be, I went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. A secondary source would be, my friend went to the Mall of America today and saw Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. It's a primary source here because I was there. I witnessed Harry Styles on the Ferris wheel. I saw it firsthand. This is a secondary source because I'm talking about my friend. I wasn't there personally. It was just my friend. That's considered a secondary source. All right, let's do a little mini quiz. No, I'm not going to grade you if you're right or wrong, just as long as you take your best educated guess. So, we have 4 options, and you're going to decide which one is a primary source. So we have the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which is A. B, we have a New York Post article about the death of Queen Elizabeth. C, which is a documentary about the Civil War by Ken Burns. And D is this E.T. interviewing Taylor Swift about her Eras tour. So, which of these 4 sources do you think are primary sources? Take your best educated guess. So they can be a little tricky sometimes. So the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin is 100% a primary source because he wrote it. He wrote about his life. It's his words. He experienced his life. The death of the Queen would be considered a secondary source because the person who's writing about the death of the Queen wasn't there for her whole entire life. The reporter is getting information from outside sources. Now, this one's a little tricky. So typically with documentaries, they are considered a secondary source, but they may have primary sources embedded within them. And then this news reporter asking Taylor Swift about her Eras tour would be a primary source because it's Taylor Swift. She's the one performing her concerts. She's there to witness it all. All right, now let's talk about some grammatical symbols in historical texts. So if you ever see brackets with SIC, that means that the translator of the text is letting the reader know there's a grammar mistake in the original language and the translator is leaving it as an error. So for example, If a historian said the two, and then put the SIC in brackets, of us are going out to dinner tonight at Maynard's, this is saying that the translator knows that the person who originally said this did the wrong two, right? It should be the TWO2, not the TOO2. But the translator's like, I know it's a mistake, but I'm leaving it. Then we have footnotes. That is when the author or translator wants to make a note about the subject being written. The note is usually then included at the bottom of the page. So, for example, he is the powerful god of all of Greece and all other gods are below him. So if I am this translator and I want to let my readers know who he is, I would put a little 1 right up here. And then at the very bottom of the page, I'd put a little 1 on the bottom, which is kind of saying like, hey, he is Zeus, the Greek god of the sky, the ruler of gods and humans. You might also see 3 dots or 3 dots in a bracket. This means that the original text is broken or missing, but historians don't know what words are missing from it. This is uber common when it comes to really ancient sources, such as these that are written on clay tablets. So if you've ever taken pottery, you know clay breaks pretty easily. So for example, this one says, Urim has ordered 3 jugs of ... payment in copper ... received tomorrow. So those ... dots mean those are those broken pieces off of this tablet here, this clay tablet. And historians just really don't know what was supposed to be written there because it's lost to time. You may also just see normal brackets. So that means that the part of the original text is missing or deformed, but historians can figure out what word should be there in the text using context clues. So, for example, we have this clay tablet here, and it says, to the sleeping one who lay at rest, to him who would not arise from his sleep. So you can see there's a pretty big chunk missing out of this clay tablet right here. But historians know enough context clues that they know what is missing from that chunk, and that's why they put it into these brackets. All right, so how to analyze a historical document. There are many ways to analyze a historical document, and I encourage you to underline and take side notes on concepts you think are important or confused about. But in this class, there are going to be 3 main questions that I will ask you about historical documents. They're 1, who were the authors or just author of the primary source? 2, who is the audience of these primary sources? Who are these primary sources written for? And no, you can't just say like historians or students or everyone. Think deeper about the time period. Who really truly is the audience for? And then number 3, why were these primary sources written? What messages are the authors trying to get across? So we're going to do an example together. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. That was by President Roosevelt. He said this. So, first question. Who were the authors, or in this case, just the one author, of the primary source? You don't have to answer it on the Ed puzzle, just think in your mind for just a second. All right, so this one is pretty straightforward. It says right here, it's President Roosevelt. Now, on some primary source documents, it's not going to be that simple. Sometimes you just have to take an educated guess. Sometimes there's no name. You just have to use context clues to figure it out. All right, number 2. Who is the audience of these primary sources? Who were these primary sources written for? Again, think deeper. Don't say historians or students or everyone. Who specifically was the author talking to? All right, so in this case, the President Roosevelt was talking to the public of the United States. He was announcing what the heck happened at Pearl Harbor, who attacked, what day, stuff like that. And then the third question, why were these primary sources written? What messages are the author trying to get across? So in this case, it's informative. President Roosevelt is telling the American people what the heck happened on December 7th, 1941, and kind of explaining who did it and then he'll go on to say why they're joining World War II. All right, let's wrap it up for today. Today we learned about history, time, BC, BCE, AD, CE, timelines, primary sources, secondary sources, a bunch of these symbols that translators like to use, and then also the 3 main questions to analyze historical documents. Next up, you're going to do U0-L8, dominant and absent narrative activities, which I will walk you through in just a second here, as well as U0-L9, AI discussion board, which I will also show you. Next week, you're going to start up Unit 1, Earliest Humans. We're going to start out with some ed puzzles. If you have any questions, do email your teacher. We are more than happy to help you. So let's take a look at our course page here. So next up, you are going to do U0-L8, dominant and absent narratives. So you're going to click onto week 2, find that, and it will pop up with this worksheet here. So, background. Throughout this course, we'll discuss dominant and absent narratives. Dominant narratives are the prevailing stories and perspectives that shape societal beliefs and values. They will often prioritize or advantage the majority or those in power. An absent narrative is a historical story that has been consequently or unconsequently marginalized, overshadowed, and excluded from a society or culture. To understand the concept of dominant and absent narratives, we are going to turn to popular culture. So for this assignment, please no AI use. I want your own thoughts and words. Also, if you need an example, I like to do examples a lot in this class, so feel free to look at my example. I did the movie Frozen, so no, you can't do Frozen. So you're going to pick a story from one of these franchises, or if you have one that you want to do that's not listed, just type it there. So dominant narrative. So what is a dominant narrative? So in your chosen media, be as specific as possible. And how do you know they represent the dominant narrative? Support your answer with specific evidence from your chosen media. And then absent narrative. Who is the absent narrative in your chosen media? And be as specific as possible. And then how do you know they represent an absent narrative? Support your answer with specific evidence from your chosen media. So once you fill that out, you're going to submit it to Schoology. And then you're going to go on to the last assignment for Unit 0, which is the AI discussion board. Ooh, exciting. All right, so you're going to click on this. You're going to open up Gemini, which is what the school district pays for. We get a premium subscription. Step 2, you're going to ask Gemini, what are some negative aspects of having AI in schools? Step 3, you're going to read Gemini's response. Then choose one of the negative aspects that you agree with the most, and then copy and paste it into your discussion post, which you can type right here. Step 4, answer the following questions in at least one complete sentence, and in your own words. Why do you agree with this one negative aspect the most? Step 5, you're going to ask Gemini, what are some positive aspects about having AI in school? You're then going to read Gemini's response, then choose one of the positive aspects that you agree with the most. Copy and paste it into your discussion post. And then finally, step 7, you're going to answer the following question in at least one complete sentence and in your own words. Why do you agree with this one positive aspect the most? All right, that will conclude Unit 0. Then we will get started with Unit 1 next week. If you have any questions, please let us know. We are more than happy to help you out. Thanks for watching. Bye.